Thank you to a man named Joel who in last week's video made a comment to me, a very sincere comment, saying that I should use the names of the books, the chapters, and the verses so that he and others could follow along with what it is that I'm talking about. And it just so happens that this week's video will benefit from such a technique. So thank you very much, Joel. And I'm going to read you all a very, very short story from the book of Matthew. It can be found in the 21st chapter at the 12th verse, and the story goes like this. Jesus walks into the temple and casts out all those who bought and sold there, that he overthrew the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who were selling doves. And this story, even though it's very, very short, made a profound impression on me when I was a youngster. A detail in this story made me very despondent for years with the Christian religion, and it made me make the final decision that the Bible was to be used for reference, perhaps teaching, a place to find good news, but it was not to be looked at as the first source and center of all truth that is related to God, or related to spirituality, or even related to the Christian religion. The detail in that story that made me feel this way was when Jesus overthrew the tables of the money changers, acting like a spoiled child who didn't get his way. In my mind, and in my opinion, and in reality, Jesus and God's personality doesn't suffer from what we call losing its cool. Now let me take you back to the 5th chapter of Matthew. The 38th verse. This is the law of Jesus as it was recorded in this book. It says, "You've all heard, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you now, don't resist evil. If someone were to smite you on your right cheek, turn to him the other cheek." Further down in the 5th chapter of Matthew, the 43rd verse says, "You've all heard the old law, to love your neighbors, but to hate your enemies. And I say to you today, love your enemies. Bless those that curse you. Do good to those who hate you. And pray for those who despitefully use you." So why such a sharp contrast between a story and account of Jesus' life and Jesus' actual laws which he professed and lived by? And the answer to this and many, many other questions comes in the more unapproachable study of early Christianity. The details of these texts can be found hidden deep within the foundations of what we call today Freemasonry. In an effort to make Christianity as a religion more palatable to the people of the Roman Empire, St. Peter and Paul and St. James seeked to make the religion more and more and more about Jesus' name, miracle workings and such. And because of this, it became less and less about Jesus' gospel. And at the same time that this was going on, there was a man named Abner who had established Jesus' gospel in a synagogue in Philadelphia. Because the synagogue in Philadelphia was not under the direct supervision of the Sanhedrin, it was able to persist in this gospel of Jesus. Abner, not to be confused with the Abner of the Old Testament, Saul's cousin, this Abner was the foremost disciple and most trusted associate of John the Baptist. And because of this, Abner was also associated with Peter, Paul, and James. Abner got in so many very heated arguments with Peter, Paul, and James over their misuse of power in the organization of this new religion, over their willingness to compromise the gospel in order to create a stronghold of converts. And it's because of these discussions that Abner's name, his works, and the works of his 70 disciples were never included in the text of the New Testament. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the story, what happened in the temple with Jesus that day. Jesus was no stranger of a temple. He had seen all of this before. And I think that it's important for me to say a little bit about these money changers and a little bit about these men who sold doves. The tradition of the day persists as it does today. Donation. But donations in those days was pretty much a requirement. And the Pharisees would reject any foreign currency. So they had bankers, or what they called money changers in this story, who would exchange your foreign currency for an acceptable form of currency by the Pharisees. This was a problem only because the bankers would charge exorbitant fees and calculate unfair exchange rates. Furthermore, sacrificing animals was a tradition in these temples. And if you wanted to bring an animal as an offering to be sacrificed, it would have to be first inspected by a Pharisee. The problem with this was that you could bring the most exquisite purebred animal that you've ever seen in all of your life, and it would undoubtedly be rejected by the Pharisees as unclean. However, you could buy a pre-blessed animal in the market down the hall for over 300% fair market value. So Jesus walks into this place and in so many words rebukes them all for their despiteful usury of the common people. And as Jesus talked, the people got a little excited. And as he continued to talk, they got more excited. And as he continued to talk, they got a little crazy, and out breaks a baby riot. They tore this place to pieces. And even though Jesus didn't approve of this method, this was the day, the beginning of the end of the tradition of sacrificing animals in public. Jesus never turned over any tables because of this perfection of personality that I talk about. God is 100% pure love. God does not occupy space with evil. God is the epitome of goodness and the pinnacle of perfection, and anything less is not worth your worship.